Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Sackur. Something extraordinary is happening in Israel. Military reservists, former security chiefs, politicians of different stripes have all joined a mass protest movement aimed at thwarting the Netanyahu government's plan to radically overhaul Israel's judicial system. The plan's critics say it threatens Israel's democracy. All this as rising violence in the occupied West Bank raises questions about the strategic direction of Netanyahu's ultra-nationalist government. Well, my guest, Simcha Rothman, is an architect of those judicial reforms. Is Israel plunging into chaos? Simcha Rothman in Jerusalem, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Would it be fair to say that you have been preparing for years for this opportunity that you have right now to impose your political will on the Israeli judiciary?
No, I don't think that the right term is impose my will on the judiciary. I think it's vice versa. I'm trying to make Israeli judiciary be more independent from the pressures it's currently have, more appointed in a way that's more democratic, like most other countries in the world that elect their judges through the democratical system. And after the judges are elected or selected, they are independent. That's the way it works in most democratic countries around the world, and that's the way it should work in Israel. In Israel, we have a very strange system where the judiciary basically self-perpetuates, self-elects itself, has a veto who will get in, and that created an ever-growing distance between the public in Israel and the judges. And it wasn't so bad if it was the situation maybe like in the UK when the court cannot cancel a law that was passed by the parliament, only give saying it's incompatible with some values, but cannot cancel the laws, definitely not enforce its views in other ways on the political systems.
You've raised a lot of points.
Better.
Yeah, you raised a lot of points there, but I guess to simplify, what you're saying is you believe that your proposed reforms boost the independence of the High Court when it seems a very clear majority of Israelis disagree. They feel that your reforms, specifically the idea that a simple majority of the Knesset can override a High Court ruling, the fact that you want the politicians to have much more power in appointing the judges, most Israelis feel that actually makes the court more dependent on the politicians, not more independent.
So I don't know what where do you draw the most Israelis from? The most Israelis that voted in elections voted for exactly those reforms that were well detailed before the elections by my party, by the Likud's party, by other parties in the coalition. It was very clear the majority of the public in Israel voted on. It's true that some people don't like it, but to say that the majority of the public in Israel do not support to change the way we select our judges or other issues, that's I don't know where you draw this conclusion, but that's not the reality.
I draw it from opinion poll surveys like the IDI's Viterbi Family Center for Public Opinion and Policy Research survey, which found that 2/3 of those surveyed opposed your proposals, and indeed, interestingly, 44% of people who voted for the parties in Netanyahu's ruling coalition actually opposed key parts of your measures.
Yeah, a small problem. The IDI is very much involved in the working against this. Is not an independent.
I see. So you like the polls. You like the polls which support your side, but when a poll comes out and actually
I don't. I like the polls that were conducted with more than 4 million voters in the Knesset that elected parties that this was a key to their agenda before the elections. I think that's the most reliable poll, not one that done by me, not one that done by the IDI, which is a player. There was a poll. The parties that supported this reform were promising it before the elections. They won a majority in election, and in democracy, that's the way it works, even that the IDI does not like it.
Yeah, does it make any difference to you that hundreds of thousands of Israelis have actually, never mind polls, never mind votes right now, but actually Israelis are taking to the streets by the hundreds of thousands to express their disapproval and their opposition to this judicial reform? Does that not matter to you?
Of course it matters to me, and demonstration is a part of a viable democracy. People can protest. That's their right. You know what? It's I should fight for this right, and I will fight for this right to demonstrate. Of course, within the law, that's okay. And I think some of them raise valid points. By the way, when you talk to the leaders of the protest or people that openly talk about this issue, the judicial reform is the smallest part of their concern. They're not voting, they're not going to the streets because of the judicial reform. They are going to the streets because they don't like the fact, and they say it openly. We should respect what they say, that Netanyahu is prime minister. They don't like the outcomes of the elections, which is okay. People can protest the fact that they don't like the outcomes of the elections, but it's not about judicial reform. Some of them are worried from a religion-based legislation. Some of it's real, most of it's fake, but the fears are definitely real, and it's our job to prove ourselves to show that those fears are not true. But the judicial reform is I think the smallest problem for the most of the protesters.
I guess it suits your agenda, Mr. Rothman, to say that the hundreds of thousands of protesters are driven by political motivation, that they're all leftists or oppositionists, but clearly that...
I did not say that.
But it's not, well, some of your colleagues have definitely said it, that this is purely political.
I did not use that. I did not use the word leftist. I did not say even political motivation. I talked about the worries that the protesters say that they have. When you listen to them, when you talk to them, that's what they say. They are worried about other issues. Some of them are worried for the judicial reforms. That's true, but I think that's the minority of the people that protesting. They are protesting about some other issues. The major concern. But it's not about the judicial reform.
See, it's interesting that the protest movement has the support of some of the most revered and apolitical institutions and figures and personalities in the country. All of the currently, all of the living attorney generals in Israel today oppose your measures. A huge number of chiefs, let me finish. A huge number of chiefs of the military, of the security agencies, have all joined together, one statement, joint statement from 400 of them, all of them opposing your measures, saying that they will be deeply damaging and dangerous for Israeli democracy. And these, as I said, are some of the most revered institutions in your country.
So you say that the legal advisors do not support a reform that will take away the extra power from the legal advisors. That's interesting. Why would they? The legal advisors in Israel, chief legal advisor in Israel, has a power like no other. I wouldn't say even public civil servant. I would say like the politician. There is an article that I wrote by, that's why I did not say leftist or right wing, because one of the leading professors is actually in the left in Israel, said that there is no other figure as powerful as the Israeli chief legal advisor. He's more powerful compared from the president of the US, prime minister of UK, and all other together, because he has the power basically to do whatever he wants to prevent the government from having her voice be heard in the court. It's a reform much needed, and I wouldn't be surprised the chief legal advisors that held this amount of power over the years do not support taking away this power.
All right,
That's
so let's if you're not happy to take the witness statements of attorney generals, you don't think that's interesting to your case. How about the 400 senior officials from the Israeli police force, the Shin Bet, the Mossad?
Again, do you suggest that people, 400 is a large number, but the number of the people that did not sign this paper from the same places are increasing? But you know what? There was, take an example from the past week. There was a paper presented with ideas on how to adjust the reform, how to make it, maybe some can say it, compromise, okay? That was presented by Professor Friedman, world-announced expert, but also Israeli-announced. He was a justice minister in Israel, in a left-wing government. He's not a guy from the right. Another Professor Yuval El-Bashan, again, not right-wing person, working. He was actually nominated by Yair Lapid, the head of the opposition, to be in senior positions just less than a year ago. And two former generals.
So are you telling me you're now ready to compromise, given the scale of the pushback that we've discussed?
I am just saying that they prepared the paper, and after they presented their paper, it was leaked to the press. Now one of them, or maybe all of them, but one of them is actually caving under it. It was just published today. They get threats to take away their signature from it with violence because from their friends or from their pressure group. So the fact that people signed this, and the fact that people in some parts of the elites in Israel are being bullied into either objecting or not to say they're supporting this kind of reform.
Sorry, Mr. Rothman, I'm a little confused. Are you saying that? Are you saying that men like the former IDF chief of staff Dan Halutz, are you saying that they are somehow bullied to take a stand?
No, I did not talk about Dan Halutz. No, you will not. Sorry.
Dan Halutz said, and I want to quote him because it's important, the former head of the military in Israel, he says, I do not want to become the mercenary of a dictator. That's a former army chief saying that in his criticism of your proposals. We have reservists across your country who are saying that they will refuse to do their reserve training in protest at your proposals.
Again, there are people that say terrible stuff. Some people that were that are ex-chief of staff in Israel, ran for a prime minister position in Israel, lost to Benjamin Netanyahu, and they basically say anything that they can in order to demonize, I would say, the government.
This isn't about demonization.
Just a second. Just a second. The fact that he says so does not make it true. If you want to talk about the substance and not do an ad hominem discussion, who said what, that's we can do. If you want to say he says, she says, we can have a very nice conversation. I can bring all the experts that support my view, but I don't think that will bring us any closer to understanding the issues at hand.
The reason why I'm interested in who has supported and who has opposed your proposals is because, in the end, this is a political as well as a legal judicial matter. As we discussed, you've worked on your effort to end what you've called the judicial dictatorship in Israel for years. You now have specific legislation you want to get through the Knesset. I just wonder if it's made any difference to you to see the scale of the opposition and to see that the protest movement has been supported by people. I'll just name one more. Netanyahu's close ally, former Shin Bet chief Yoram Cohen, who is as close as anyone to Netanyahu and who has said in the recent past, passing this reform in its current state, quote, will lead to disaster.
Again, if you want quotes, we can quote people from this side or from that side.
So none of these people have given you pause for thought. That's what I want to establish.
I think that applying to authority does not make a very good argument. If there are claims, I can talk about the claims. If there are, I say it's bad because I said so, that's not a discussion that I am capable of doing, because I don't think actually it will make a good conversation. If you want, we can tell, and then I can quote the people who support. You know that Nobel Prize winner. If you want, if it's okay, if it's fine by you, Nobel Prize winner came to the committee on the first day and said that my reform is too subtle. It has to be more harsh. We should have no judge in the Judicial Selection Committee. Israel Uman, Nobel Prize winner, world-announced economist, and very expert in game theory. That's why he's an expert witness on the way you build a committee to elect judges.
Let me
Professor
just ask you.
Tali Eineren, which wrote a very detailed description of comparative international law on many issues. So we can, if it's about name dropping, who supports and who objects, that's I don't think it's so interesting. But if you want, we can do this.
What will
if
happen?
you want to talk about the matters, I think it will be more interesting. But it's up to you, of course.
Mr. Rothman, what will happen if you push this legislation all the way through the Knesset, and then the High Court, as it still has the power to do, blocks it? What will you do?
No, it does not have the power to do it.
It can still declare it unlawful.
The Supreme Court cannot declare a basic law unlawful. That is the position that the Knesset the Knesset legal advisor for, I can't even count how many times, said very specifically on behalf of all the Knesset, right, left, coalition, opposition, former governments, this government, always said that the court does not have this power in Israel, just as like the Supreme Court in the US cannot cancel amendments to the Constitution, just like the Supreme Court in the UK cannot cancel legislation. Just like
the difference is that basic law in Israel is not a constitution.
Cannot cancel legislation. So what you're asking me now, what will Israel do if the Supreme Court will say, I am not committed to the law? That's a very good question. You should ask a person who thinks that the court can decide that a basic law in Israel that was passed lawfully is unlawful, and based on what? So to ask this question, I think that's a very good question to ask. But
in
you should
your
ask
opinion,
anyone
Mr.
who
Rothman,
suggests that the court can act without a law.
In your opinion, Mr. Rothman, if the court does try to use what it sees as its power to block this legislation, could it plunge Israel?
No, I don't think the court
could it plunge Israel into civil violence? Could it?
I think that in every situation that the army or a police or any other security organizations do not get their orders from the elected officials of a country, that country stops being a democracy. That's a threat to democracy I can talk about. But to say that a democracy is that a self-perpetuating, self-elected court decides that a basic law that was passed in the Knesset lawfully does not bind him, that's not democracy, that's not rule of law. That's not a situation I think that will happen in Israel. And I think even suggesting it means that you, as a person who asked this question, do not believe that the courts in Israel are obligated to the rule of law. I don't think that's the situation. If that's the situation, we are in a much graver danger than any of the dangers you just mentioned.
Is it the case that Israel faces a twin challenge right now, in your opinion? Not only is there turmoil inside the country, and there is turmoil, but we also see intensifying violence across the militarily occupied West Bank. It's a twin challenge for Israel. Do you think Israel is struggling to meet it?
I think that the violence by the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria is something that is basically constant in Israel. Of course, there is ups and downs, but I think we are facing this challenge, and the reasons for that challenge has nothing to do with what's happening in Israel. The reason is because the Palestinian Authority pays for terrorists that murder Jews. They pay them extra if they do more crimes, if they kill more people, if they are citizens of Israel, they get extra money for doing so. And the fact that they are getting money to kill Jews and they're teaching to kill Jews in their schools, that makes terror in Judea and Samaria become a very constant situation.
The spiral,
not from today, not recently.
No,
that's happening all the time.
The spiral of violence is, though, intensifying. At least 14 Israelis killed since the beginning of the year, and more than 70 Palestinians killed since the beginning of this year. In that context, do you think it is helpful?
No,
do you think it is helpful to see
Jewish
settlers, hundreds of them, rampaging through a Palestinian village, Huwara, burning properties, burning businesses, to see the Israeli military standing by doing nothing, and then have the leader of your party, Bezalel Smotrich, tweet out things like this: the village of Huwara needs to be wiped out. I think the state of Israel needs to do that. Is that helpful?
So, again, I think that about the quote, it's not the exact quote. That's not a tweet by him. Definitely not in English. But anyway, he explained exactly what he said. He said, and he also apologized for any person who understood it the way you tried to color it.
Well, it's not how I understood it. It's how the U.S. State Department understood it. They described it as irresponsible, repugnant, and disgusting. They said, forgive me, they said it was an incitement to violence.
No, but if you want me to answer questions, I think I can talk for more than 10 seconds uninterrupted, if it's okay. But I think that this to look at what happened in Hawara was at that day was terrible. It was terrible when two innocent Jews were murdered just because they're Jews. In the middle, two brothers that did nothing to harm anyone, they were murdered. That was terrible. That happened in Hawara the same day. It was also very, very troubling. And it was also terrible that people hurt innocent people afterwards. But no one, thank God, no one died from that. And it wasn't justified, and it was terrible. But I think that coloring situation when there is the Palestinian Authority that pays good money from its own budget.
You've made that point, Mr. Rothman. I need to finish up.
Yeah, we made it clear.
You've made that point already.
Just a second.
We're almost out of time.
I made this point already, and yet, despite the fact that you have this government-like entity that pays money to kill Jews, you still think that something that someone tweeted that was taken out of context, that's the problem.
This is the most
nationalist. On the main problem, and the main problem is the incitement and the terror and the state-sponsored terror in the Palestinian Authority.
And we will end on that note. But Simcha Rothman, I thank you very much for joining me on Hard Talk. Thank you.
Thank you.